TiderInsider.com. If you went to the website, it's a hopping and a popping right now when you talk about people logging into the forums and exchange for information. More coverage as we continue National Signing Day on TiderInsider.com. Rodney Orr, happy National Signing Day. I hope you're having a great day.
Doing well, Ryan. How are you?
Good. Another busy day, I'm sure, for you. Very busy.
Yeah. It's kind of gone about like I guess you could anticipate if you can make those kind of, anticipations or judgments or whatever in terms of how a signing day is going to go. Everything so far seems to have gone according to plan. So it's not been too bad.
Well, I want to spend a little bit of time talking about is there anything else expected? Now, we've been covering it all day here, as you have on your website. As we travel throughout the next couple of hours, Nick Saban's scheduled to talk at 4 o'clock. What's still left to happen for the Alabama Crimson Tide in the next few hours, if anything?
Well, yeah, I mean, again, I think when you look at, first of all, let's say this, Ryan. I think the way recruiting is right now, if you've got a class like Alabama had coming into signing day and you hold on to them with all these top guys, it's been a tremendous day. Anything else is kind of gravy, in my opinion. And so when I say that, I think that Alabama today, with what they've held on to, especially the announcement within the last, 30, 40 minutes of Timothy Smith, the defensive lineman from down in Sebastian, Florida. I think he's rated a 4-star player, Ryan. He's a difference maker up front, in my opinion. I think he's one of the best defensive linemen Alabama signed, and they signed some really, really good ones last year. I think this guy's got a chance to be just an outstanding defensive lineman. Sal Sinceri did an incredible job with him, no question about that. So I think where they are right now is they've done an outstanding job of holding on to what they have. Now, Bryce Young is supposed to sign here at 3 o'clock our time, 1 o'clock on the West Coast. So that gives Alabama a 5-star elite quarterback prospect. And, Ryan, I would say this, if because you know how fans are. They like to compare to other schools. And you've been hearing a lot of, LSU's been kind of running off at the mouth a lot, and Georgia always does, as you know, about how they're recruiting. And so they've kind of been getting a lot of the publicity that Alabama's been used to getting over the last few weeks. And but one thing they're not getting is an elite quarterback. And I think that's probably a big difference right now as I look at those recruiting classes. That's a big difference that Alabama has going in their favor.
What was it about Alabama that Bryce Young fell in love with?
Well, I think, first of all, Steve Sarkisian a little bit had a relationship with him, maybe not as tight as what everyone tried to make it out to be, but they had known each other for a long time, and that connection certainly helped. And I do think that they liked Sarkisian a lot because he had known Bryce since Bryce was pretty young, when Sarkisian was the head coach at USC. So I think that helped, and the West Coast ties in general helped. But I think, too, Ryan, he and his family came here on a few visits and looked at the place, and I think his parents saw there's a huge difference in a lot of things, if you want to put it that way, about Alabama versus what happens on the West Coast. I mean, the intensity here in the SEC, the competitive spirit that we see at all these games, the atmosphere, something that's really exciting. It's electric. The facilities, all of the things that they have that prepare these kids, on the field, off the field, just something that you don't see as much out there on the West Coast. And then you see Tua, and I think that may be the biggest thing. The success that Tua's had here, he's kind of changed everything in terms of the perception of Alabama football. For quarterbacks, wide receivers, the style of play that Alabama now uses. I think what he's done, and these receivers too, and Nick Saban, of course, altering the system, I think that made a strong, strong impact on Bryce Young and his family.
Rodney, if we went to go back to August and we pulled some of our conversations, we try to feature Rodney Orr, TiderInsider.com, TITV, WVUA, Gary Harris, each Tuesday at 6:30 and 10:30. You can find it on YouTube as well on WVUH. You can go to TiderInsider.com. It's right there, and you can watch last night's version. But if we went back, we talked about the need for Alabama, what they needed. Do you think they fulfilled those needs? If we go back and pull the tape from August when we were laying out this signing class and maybe what you look at and you say, Alabama really needs to get this, did they do that?
Well, I think they have for the most part. You know, you got an elite quarterback. We talked about that. They've got a couple of they'll end up with a couple of good wide receivers. Running backs will be, because I think they're going to flip Jace McClellan from Oklahoma later today. He's been rated a 5-star running back. They may have dropped him a little bit, but he's a tremendous prospect out of Aledo, Texas. So they're going to finish strong at running back. I think with Timothy Smith on the defensive line and some of these other guys that they've gotten, the linebackers and some of the DBs, I think they've filled a lot of those needs. They're not through yet. You know, you've got the late signing period. You might take another outstanding defensive lineman like a McKinley Jackson, for example, which if they could team him with Timothy Smith, that would be a pretty impressive duo. You know, you might find you another wide receiver. I think they really got to figure out what they're going to do at tight end. Darnell Washington is still out there, the 5-star, and a lot of people think, you know, he'll end up at Georgia or maybe even Tennessee. But I'll tell you, I know late last night he was on the phone with Alabama, and he still has an interest, a very strong interest. I think Jeff Banks has Alabama in the middle of it. You know, we'll see what happens. But I do think they have to, you know, try to figure out what they're going to do to kind of shore up tight end.
So the Bryce Young it's just a matter of just a ceremony and that, because Alabama fans, you know, they look for a reason to get concerned. And They I guess sometimes they create their own anxiety.
Yes, they do.
And so when you look at it, there's no concerns here. Bryce Young signed the dotted line, and they'll get that paperwork in, and Nick Saban will be able to talk about it at 4 o'clock.
Well, I think, Ryan, what happens is, and you know why, I don't know, but I think some people, maybe Tom Luganville might have been one of, I didn't hear what he said, but he suggested that UCLA might be a team. I've never heard UCLA was involved with Bryce Young at all. There were some rumors over the weekend that he may flip to USC. Bryce came out and said in an interview after those rumors that he was signing with Alabama. He was looking forward to signing with Alabama and enrolling here in early January, that it was a done deal. Knowing him and also having the opportunity to speak with his dad, Craig, I don't ever get the feeling, have never gotten the feeling, that they were the type that would, you know, flip in a situation like this. Now you say, well, they flipped from USC. There were some different circumstances there without going all through that again. But those were totally different circumstances, and they hated to flip from USC. But they saw an opportunity and something that they felt was really where he needed to be, which was Alabama. So I don't really know why these things pop up, but they did, and Bryce Young's dad, I know he told one of the longtime writers out in Los Angeles at the Los Angeles Times just an hour or so ago that he would sign with Alabama today at 3 o'clock our time.
So Alabama has 2 running backs, and why I bring that up is you don't know exactly about Najee Harris. I think most people anticipate that he'll put his name in the hat. That would leave Brian Robinson and Trey Sanders. I look back at this year, and we could talk about a lot of different injuries, and I think a lot of the arguments and a lot of discussions that we talk about with Joshua McMillan, Dylan Moses, but I continue to go back at depth at running back. You can never have too many backs, whether you talk about Derrick Henry's 2015 Heisman winning campaign with 395 carries. Even though you think you're okay at running back, a lot of times you're not. You got to sign a good quality running back, and if they could put 3 in this class, that'd be a big number. And they've got 2 right now locked down, but if they could get that 3rd coming up later this afternoon, that'd be huge.
Well, you're right, Ryan. Yeah, I've found out one thing about running backs, and I'm sure it applies to other positions as well, but running backs, you think you have enough, and you never really do, it seems like. And I remember one year, the year they signed Derrick Henry, Alti Tenpenny, Tyron Jones, Alvin Kamara. people were saying, why did Alabama sign 4 running backs? And a couple of years later, only one of them was still here. And it wasn't because necessarily the playing time, whatever. There were different circumstances that were involved, and it just turned out the way it did. And then you get into that season in 2015, and Derek had to carry the load because Kenyon Drake was injured quite a bit that year, if you remember. And Derek was carrying it 45, 46, 7 times a game, and in some of those games. So they just didn't have the depth. Thankfully, they had a guy that was a workhorse like none other. So you're right, Ryan. I agree with you. I think taking a great back like Jace McClellan to go with Roydell Williams and Kyle Edwards, I think that's a good idea.
Rodney, final couple of questions here. We're talking to Rodney Orr, TighterInsider.com. If you want the latest information, as Rodney is literally multitasking as he talks about the website and as tries to do as many radio interviews as he possibly can. When you look at this offensive line class, because it's another part of that when you win in the trenches, highlight a couple of those guys that you think that you think will be guys that you could project and see futures of just being great offensive linemen. That seems to be a trend here in Tuscaloosa as that kind of tradition continues. Look at the offensive line guys that they signed here.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think if you're referring to this class, right?
Yeah, I am. Yeah, right.
The ones I got. Yeah. Okay. Seth McLaughlin is a kid that, it came down to Alabama and Clemson. He committed to Alabama quite some time ago. But he probably doesn't get the notoriety. It reminds me a little bit of when Ryan Kelly was coming out of high school. He was a 3-star player out of Ohio. Sal Sinceri kind of discovered him. And Seth McLaughlin is a guy that I think out of Georgia that, he can really develop into a center, could possibly even end up a tackle. But I think he's really smart, got a chance to be a center. Damian George, I don't know if he's going to sign today out of the Houston area at Galena Park, North Shore in Texas. He's a massive kid, like 16 years old, maybe just turned 17, and he's like 6'6", 335, 340. And he's a guy that I think potentially has some tools that could develop over time to become a really good player. And again, I don't know if he's going to sign today or not. And then the other one that I really like, in fact, he was named to that Sports Illustrated first-team All-American squad that was committed to Auburn, Javion Cohen from Phoenix City Central. Just like him. You look at him physically, he looks very, very good, about 6'5", 290 pounds, a kid that's really starting to fill out and grow, and I think Scott Cochran can do a great job of developing him. He's got a lot of skills with his feet and hands. So I like him too. I think next year I would think that the 2021 class is going to be one that Alabama puts a lot of emphasis on the offensive line.
Rodney, I'd like for you to do a story. I'm going to request a story.
Okay.
Not today, maybe next week after Christmas. I'd love to hear, because you are one of those guys that's not going to inflate it to be a title or a page click, but I'd love to see it, just to pick a high-profile recruit. You can go to Alabama's class or you can go to anybody else. You ever wonder how many texts they get in a day? How many letters that could you imagine?
I can tell you a story right now as we're talking.
I'm ready. I'm ready because I'm just thinking about the relief. Once they sign that dotted line, you could imagine how their life that they've been accustomed to for the last 18 months changes.
Well, I remember it's been many years ago, Trent Richardson. It was the summer before his senior year. He came up here on a visit, and he and I had been texting, and we agreed to meet take some pictures. And so this was before he actually, or after his visit, when he was. So we met at a local place here and took some pictures. And so Trent's standing there, and we're kind of talking, and he's holding his cell phone. And Ryan, I have never, just the text messages that were coming, it was nonstop. I mean, click, 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 click. And I'm like, man, how do you deal with this? And he was really so nice about it. I remember standing there taking his picture, and some couple of young girls walked by and said, "Hey, is this guy famous?" And I said, "Well, not yet, but he's going to be." And of course he was already very famous with college coaches.
Sure.
But Ryan, his phone, how that kid managed that phone, I never know. But he was so nice about the whole thing. That's what really struck me was how nice he was about the whole thing.
It is Rodney Orr. It's TighterInsider.com, TighterInsider.com. Rodney, I appreciate you so much. Thank you again for being a part of the show. Enjoy the afternoon. Take a deep breath, and we'll talk to you very, very soon. Thank you, Rodney.
Hey, Ron, appreciate it. Take care.